There's this letter by Charles Dickens talking about how he could give a speech about poverty and inequality and no one would listen, or he could write a book and he could move people and he could transport people and he could change their minds and he could change the world. And what the Great Christmas Feast tries to do is capture that moment in this icon in a world where we think of him as an older statesman, a legend, actually capturing the struggle, the rise, the grappling against the odds of one of the greatest writers of all time.
The story is about Charles Dickens in the presentation of A Christmas Carol.
We think of Charles Dickens as the old man with the mutton chops, but actually, like any of us, Charles Dickens lived a whole life.
He came from a background where he was put to work in the blacking factory in Warren's blacking warehouse at the age of 12. He has known intense grief. He's known real poverty. He's known what it is like to be rejected by a Victorian society of which he knows he has to climb the ranks to be able to survive within. It's such a cruel and difficult world that if you don't have money, you're really, really outcast. And that if you don't have status, you're in a real dire situation. He's invited to go into and join Parliament. And he rejects that because to effect change, he knows that it's more powerful to create a work of fiction that talks directly to the hearts of people than to go into Parliament and try to change things from the inside. He realizes that the pen is mightier than the sword.
A Christmas Carol was Charles Dickens' breakthrough work. He wasn't this out-and-out superstar success story.
We find him at the age of 31. He's got 4 children already and there's a 5th on the way. And his latest book, Martin Chuzzlewit, hasn't done as well as what he would hoped it would have done. He's in a place of real self-doubt and insecurity about whether or not his writing will carry him to the place that he knows he can get to. And he does not know if this is going to work.
He's been kind of holed up in his study. He's been writing frantically, going out for a long walk, coming back and then writing even more.
He's pacing about 15 to 20 miles every evening whilst writing A Christmas Carol. And he writes it so furiously fast that it takes him 6 weeks to complete the entire novella.
And he's invited his close friends and family to his house for a first reading of this book, which he genuinely believes is going to change the world.
The stakes for Charles are huge.
I find it really interesting that he never mentions at any point that he wants to become a writer. He wanted to become an actor, and he happened on the day of the audition at the Covent Garden Theatre to get the flu, or he was ill, and he was always a sickly child. However, he keeps writing and he knows that he's got something here.
He's like the king of adjectives. Like, he uses adjectives so much in a way that nobody does anymore. And he's like the most masterful sentence creator. Like, there's an amazing one at the beginning, which is the cold became biting and water turned to misanthropic ice. Scrooge wakes up in the middle of a prodigiously tough snore. It's like, who writes that? Like, nobody writes that nowadays.
Dickens loved performing. He loved testing out his characters, and he would look in the mirror to try and find out the facial features of the characters and the way that would make them sound. And he would put those thoughts into the book himself.
He used to throw these massive parties to perform and to do mesmerism and to have music and to do all these kind of wonderful things because he absolutely adores hosting and he loves being the center of attention.
Dickens had literally hundreds of bottles of booze, from like fine champagnes to clarets to bottles of gin. I mean, this guy loved to drink.
There's a handwritten sort of table of contents of Dickens' cellar that he found. Includes all sorts of things, lots and lots of very, very high quality wines, ports, Madeiras. He had pineapple rum that he made himself. He also did things like, I think he added, or at least altered, but potentially added an extension to his old house so that he was able to do these readings to give himself enough room.
He was even recommended by his doctor to keep performing even in the latter stages of his life because it did him good, the world of good.
The story is about where he is in his life and this brilliant man, and the lengths he went to and the depths he went to pull one of the most iconic stories in the world out of his brain and then to share it with the world.
I mean, it's touched people, over the last however many generations. It's been touching people for the last 200 years. We almost underestimate it as a story because it's so well known, it's so classic. Oh yeah, it's that one about Tiny Tim and Scrooge, I know it. And actually, at the heart of it, it's so profound and it's so moving and it's so harrowing.
You're watching Christmas Carol, the story that we all know. However, watching Charles Dickens tell it unlocks a completely new world of his life.
It's the story about one man's journey as he sees essentially not only the faults in himself, but it's kind of the faults of humankind as a whole.
I just believe in A Christmas Carol, you know, it's a work that has such power and such meaning, and it was written with such intensity and intention. It was written to change the world, and I'm just obsessed with trying to get its meaning across to more people in more vivid, in more profound ways, to try and continue that legacy that Charles Dickens started.
The audience get to come in and experience a novel that they might not have heard for the very first time and meet the really famous characters of the novel for the very first time as Dickens would have seen it. We sort of hit all of the senses. There's amazing food to taste, the drinks to smell, the theatre to see, the music to listen to. You are transported into a Victorian Christmas. There's no space like it, and it's an electric feeling.